A little more. Thank you, Abby. This is going to be recorded, so hopefully, if you want to listen to this later or you want to use this as reference, that's fine. Um, this is, yeah, James Owen, Renew, Missouri. We are going to be talking about recent PSC cases. Now, unfortunately, this is not the most recent PSC cases because we had written this presentation to do back in June of 2024. We were going to have an all-day CLE. We ended up not getting enough people signed up for that, so we decided to break this up and do this over the course of several months, which we've been doing. A number of you have been on those other PSC, not PSC, but those other Renew Missouri related CLEs, and so we appreciate you coming back. We are going to be talking about essentially cases that were decided by the Public Service Commission in late 2023 and early 2024. This goes up to about the summer. So we don't have any information on here, like as an example, we don't have any information on here about the most recent Ameren, Missouri gas plant CCN, which was just approved by the commission. We will almost certainly be doing a presentation on that in the near future. But we are also not talking about the Ameren rate cases, not Ameren rate cases, the Ameren Mia cases or the Evergy Mia cases, because those are still kind of in flux to a certain degree, even though we've been working on them for a while. This also does not include anything in regards to the Evergy West case, because as we were working on this, a lot of that was still confidential because it was being settled. Now it is in the form of a unanimous stipulation and agreement, but we will probably talk about the Evergy West rate case in another um, at another time. So Abby Dickinson, who is our development and I don't know what else do you do. You work on our camp. You're a campaign associate, Abby, and she is going to be producing this today, and she's going to be helping us get through these slides. She's also going to be monitoring any comments or questions you have. So if you have those as we go along, I would like to try to answer them as we're going. Or if you want to save them for the end, why that's okay too. Um, Next slide, please. Okay, so who are we? What are we? What do we do? This is Renew Missouri. A lot of you probably know who we are and what we do. If you're on this webinar, we are a clean energy advocacy group. We are a 501c3. We are based in Columbia, Missouri, but we have offices in St. Louis, Kansas City, Springfield, Piedmont, Missouri, and we're also potentially looking at hiring someone in Kirksville. If you know anyone in Kirksville who's looking for a job. We work on renewable energy. We work on energy efficiency. We are also starting to put a lot of focus on battery energy storage systems, BESS. That's another great alphabet soup that we're going to get to talk about. A lot of our work is done in front of the Public Service Commission, which is, and I don't really think we even get into this in this presentation, but in case you don't know, the Public Service Commission is the state entity that regulates investor-owned utilities and makes decisions on whether they are able to raise their rates, whether they can build generation or transmission. They basically dictate big, significant decisions that investor-owned utilities make. That includes Ameren, that includes Evergy, that includes Liberty Empire, plus water and gas companies that are owned by shareholders or privately held otherwise. A lot of people don't realize how extensive, as an example, the Public Service Commission is when dealing with water cases. There's all these really small water systems that if they're privately owned, they have to get their rates and their infrastructure approved by the Public Service Commission, which can be its own webinar. But we're going to just talk about a certain amount of cases. In addition to working in front of the Public Service Commission, Renew Missouri also works with municipal utilities. We work with city councils around the state. We work with advisory boards to those municipal utilities. We work with rural electric cooperative member owners. In some cases, we do work with the rural electric cooperatives themselves. We just had a really productive meeting with, say, Platte Clay Rural Electric Cooperative last week in regards to some energy efficiency programs we wanted them to consider. And we also lobby in front of the Missouri legislature. We do that to a limited extent because we are a 501(c)(3) and we cannot spend too much time in front of the Missouri legislature, but we do spend some time there. Um, yeah, okay, next slide. And then there's me. I'm James Owen. I'm the executive director of this fine organization. I do pretty much whatever else we don't have anybody else doing here. I am the former public counsel for the state of Missouri. That's the ratepayer advocate that was in front of the Public Service Commission. Um, and I have oh my gosh, this is an old slide. It says I've been here for 4 years. I have been here for 7.5 years as of this month. So that's exciting. I'm also an attorney. I am also a former judge, and I'm also a former farmhand. I used to work on my parents' dairy farm. So that gives me a lot of cred. Okay, next slide, please. So let's talk about some of the cases that were relevant and that were of significance during this late 2023, early 2024 period. Let's talk about the Grain Belt Express because, my goodness, we have not talked nearly enough about the Grain Belt Express in the past dozen years or so here in Missouri. For a lot of you who may not know what the Grain Belt Express is, that is a merchant line. That is a privately owned transmission line that is basically going to be delivering power two different directions. It's bidirectional. Excuse me. It starts in near Dodge City, Kansas. It is delivering wind across Kansas, across Missouri, and I think ultimately now it was supposed to go into Indiana, but now it's just ultimately, I think, just going to Illinois, where then it is going to be delivering power to a lot of the East Coast in some of the initial applications. That's all the Grain Belt Express was doing. But once that was determined not to have enough of an interest with the state of Missouri and its ratepayers, the company owning it, which is currently now Invenergy. Invenergy is the private company that is in charge of the Grain Belt Express and developing the Grain Belt Express. They ended up working out a deal where they are going to be delivering power to a number of municipal utilities in Missouri. And I know they're also, someone has told me the chat is disabled. Um, uh, Abby, maybe you can see if we can get the chat back up and running because someone just texted me a question and I'd very much like to answer it for them. So but I will get to that question in a minute because I want to make sure we get this. I do not have a slide based on that question, but I can answer it. So the Grain Belt Express was initially approved by regulators in 2019. But then the company came back and they wanted to add more to it. They wanted to add another 35 megawatts of capacity. And that was what they were coming back to do. Can we go to the next slide, or are we still working on the chat issue? Abby?
I fixed the chat. It should be enabled now.
Okay, thank you. So if you were wanting to chat, that should be good. Okay, so with this amendment, Grainbelt was kind of going back to square one with this, and they were wanting, not just to be declared a utility for the purpose of um, being able to use eminent domain, which is an important tool for a transmission project, to be able to do a taking of private land for just compensation. But they also had to meet the requirements of what necessitates a certificate of convenience and necessity in the state. And that includes the tartan factors. So the project needs to meet the 5 tartan factors. That the applicant is qualified and has financial ability to provide service. Project is economically feasible. There is a need for the project, and the project is in favor of the public interest. This is the arguments that Grain Belt Express were making. This is the arguments that we were making to help bolster and help support that. In regards to what it means to be qualified and financially able, that in 2019, the commission had already determined that Grain Belt Express had qualifications as a company that could build a plant like this and had the financial ability to provide such service. Um, the feasibility involved findings that this was privately funded. There was no danger of burdensome rates to consumers, no loss of power if it ceases to exist. Grain Belt Express gained an investor, and the cost of wind decreased through the CCN approval process. As a lot of you may know, that as we go along. Okay, so is the okay, good question from Susan Armstrong. Um, is this wind or solar? My understanding is it is just wind. Maybe someone here can correct me on that, but I believe that the Grain Belt Express is exclusively delivering wind power from Kansas to areas along this route and ultimately out to I think the idea was that this was going to be being sold to PJ&M, the RTO that covers a lot of the East Coast. Um, so I hope that answers that question. Um, need does um, the need does not necessarily mean essential. It just means it's an improvement justifying the cost. One of the things that Renew Missouri always tries to argue is that the increased presence of clean energy in the state, the increased accessibility to it ultimately benefits customers. There's not just the climate benefits or the carbon benefits of having clean energy, but there's also the matter of that utilities are in demand. They have demands for renewable energy. There are expectations that they will be using renewable energy. Customers want renewable energy. Corporate customers are very interested in renewable energy. We'll have a little bit more on that in a moment. Um, that these are some of the things that help make an economic argument for a project like Grain Belt Express. And then, of course, the last factor that we're talking about is the public interest. We believe that Grain Belt Express will result in lower rates. It will result in economic development, increased air quality, um, and Grain Belt Express did say they were going to try to avoid eminent domain if at all possible. Now, that has not proven to be the case. There are a number of contested condemnation cases that have been filed along this line. I believe most of them are getting resolved as we speak, either through settlement or through the courts. People have that right to do that. People have a right to challenge what the just compensation is that they're going to get under a transmission project. But the reality is that Grain Belt Express, before this most current case, had been declared a utility, had been declared to have the right to eminent domain, and they were going to use it. Now, the Missouri legislature back in, I want to say 2021 had essentially said that anyone that had a homestead, which is to say they had a farm or land that had been in their family for a significant amount of time and had been used for agricultural purposes, they were going to have to get paid more compensation uh, as defined by the statute, which I would say good. I think that if you are going to have your property taken and you're going to have this easement there, they should give you a lot of money for that. I think that's certainly okay. But yes, and that was part of how Grainbelt Express was able to acquire their easements along this line. Next slide, please. Okay, so again, um, the commission has there's a lot of history here with the commission on this. Initially in 2017, the application was denied, basically saying that there was not appropriate county assents, that there was not appropriate interaction with the state. There was not enough contacts there. But in 2019, that was changed. The application changed. That case went all the way to the Supreme Court, um, where Renew Missouri argued along with the Grain Belt Express that consent and assent are two very different things. It was not so much that the county had to say, okay, we are okay with the Grain Belt Express going over our land. They just had to be able to say, like, well, we've done the studies, we've shown that it's not going to have an impact on our roads, it's not going to have an impact on how our general infrastructure works. So we say, that's okay. So essentially, the Supreme Court was saying that no one county can just veto the Public Service Commission. Um, and there's also this real complicated, uh, this pretty complicated um, distinction between a transmission line and area certificate for convenience and necessity. Um, the Grain Belt Express had requested a line CCN under section 391-170, which is not conditioned prior county assents. And that was another part of their argument. Primary need for this project was to benefit. Oh my gosh, this is always like the funniest set of letters for me. This is the power pool that the municipal utilities use. We call it MUDGMUC. I don't know what that stands for. I have to look it up every time. But that is essentially what the primary need for this was. Um, they were going to be able to purchase up to 200 megawatts from the Grain Belt Express. And ultimately that is going to get built, and that's going to let's see, KU Energy Conference presented and talked about wind and solar on the Grain Belt Express. Yeah, this is something I can tell you. We're starting to see a lot of articles and discussion about this project, not just in Missouri, but also in Kansas and in Illinois. There are a lot of court cases now and a lot of court opinions that have been formulated about Grain Belt Express. And it is a really interesting case study for lawyers or researchers who are trying to figure out, what does it mean to be a utility? What does it mean to have a necessity to deliver clean energy to different parts of the country? How does that interact with the rights of property owners? How does that interact with potential abuses of eminent domain? I mean, I think there's a lot of really interesting concepts that are brought up by this project, by this case. Certainly not certainly not something we can cover in a short period of time, but I think I would encourage you to look at Bill has put a helpful link into the webinar chat, um, and I would encourage you to look at that. Okay, next slide, please. Oh, look, and we're still and we're still talking about Grain Belt Express. I told you there was a lot to talk about with this. um, there are conditions and caveats to this. There are rules that are going to go along with this CCN that are designed to protect landowners. If this does not get built, there is a process put in place to return any easement that's been granted to the landowners, fee simple. Hope there's any lawyers on there who know anything about, fee simple and remainderment and all those other things that we talked about in property class back in law school. there would be a arbitration for easement negotiations. There'd be a decommissioning fund and a protocol for agriculture impact mitigation. I mean, look, I don't want anyone to think that Renew Missouri is not sympathetic or empathetic to the concerns of agriculture interests in this state, or that we are simply unconcerned about it. I can tell you from my experience, my family farm in Southwest Missouri has a transmission line that goes over three separate parcels of it. Now that is a transmission line that is owned by a rural electric cooperative generation and transmission organization. Those generation and transmission organizations are largely exempt from any laws that the legislature have passed that put restrictions on the cost of easements and that sort of thing. Not to mention the fact that rural electric cooperatives are not regulated by the Public Service Commission at all. So there was no need for the Public Service Commission to even weigh in on that. I mean, the reality is that power's got to be delivered and power's got to move. And so, that's got to be built somewhere. And so, from my perspective, I know what kind of hardship and what kind of difficulties that can place on a family farm. But in the end, you've got to weigh the general interests of the public. And so I think that's what the Public Service Commission did with Grain Belt Express. And I think we'll eventually see that get built. I don't know. There's been a lot of fighting about that still, but as a matter of fact, I think this current case is still in front of the Western District Court of Appeals. I think they had an oral argument about the amended CCN back in September. The Western District has not issued an opinion on that, to my knowledge. I don't think they've issued an opinion on that. Not to mention the fact, I think that the Western District also just ruled on a challenge to the Grainbelt Express from Sheridan County, which is separate than the appeal of the PSC decision. So there are still active cases going on with this. And we're waiting to see how those turn out. Next slide, please. Okay. Hmm. Finally, another case. Um, so this is interesting, and I think relevant even now, even though this got resolved back in the spring of 2024. That Ameren had come to the Public Service Commission with a number of projects that they were wanting approved. Again, these are those CCNs, those Certificate of Convenience and Necessity. And these are for not just these large scale solar projects, but this was also in totality of creating a corporate subscription program where these specific solar arrays would be used to generate power that would be offsetting corporate use. We're talking about quite a bit of power here. We're talking about 300 megawatts in Warren County, 150 megawatts in Cass County, Illinois, 50 megawatts in Audrain County, 50 megawatts in Pike County. I mean, so in the end, you're talking about, what is that? That's like 550 megawatts of solar. I mean, not insignificant. That's a lot of solar. But when you look at like who this was supposed to be appealing to and who is going to be taking advantage of this, it's for customers who use a lot of power and use a lot of energy. And ultimately, we see a lot of corporate customers that have significant presence in Missouri that have sustainability missions as part of their directives from shareholders. And so this is Ameren trying to be receptive to that. Next slide, please. Our position, Renew Missouri's position on this was pretty similar to what Ameren's position was. I mean, I know that Renew Missouri gets kind of perceived as being anti-utility or kind of anti-IOU anyway. But I mean, there are more cases than not where we are supporting the utilities positions and we're supporting their applications and filings. I mean, certainly with renewable energy projects. Makes sense, right? Makes sense that we would support those things. The question that we propose here, that we believe that these are economically feasible, we believe they're in the public interest, we believe they were a logical investment. Solar is cost competitive with conventional technology, and that's even when you consider it as unsubsidized. I know that solar takes a lot of flack, and there's a lot of criticism about solar that it only exists because the government subsidizes it. It only exists because there are tax credits for it. I mean, look, there are tax credits and there are grants and there are loans that are very specific right now to solar, to wind, to battery storage. But I believe that is because, I mean, currently, we have a federal administration that is wanting to see clean energy become a predominant way that we make power in this country. I think if you were to take some or all of that away, the fact that solar and wind does not need to be transported or imported from other states, it does not. It's not in itself a commodity that is going to be priced. Um, there are advantages to that, there are opportunities to that. And so we believe that if you look at the levelized cost of energy and the feasibility, it is favorable. And it's even more favorable when you're factoring in those ITC and PTC credits, which, by the way, Ameren and Evergy are currently trying to take advantage of those tax credits, as they should, as that's what they're there for private utilities to be able to invest in this sort of thing. And right now it's at a minimum 30%, but there are riders to that. There are additors to that that can make it go up to 40 or 50%, maybe even more, but it's a little tricky to do more than that. So yeah, so we believe it's economically feasible. We believe that the public interest is strong for this. We believe that the public interest has been defined by the Public Service Commission to support the development of renewable energy that is safe, it's reliable, it's affordable, while reducing harmful emissions. But at the same time, again, what I keep emphasizing is it does promote economic activity. There are businesses, there are corporations that, in order to locate to Missouri or to stay in Missouri, are wanting access to clean energy. I mean, I think you look at the example of the fact that Walmart, they signed on to subscribe to this very program. That's a sign to me. I mean, Walmart's got, I think, a little over 450 stores in the state of Missouri, not to mention their distribution centers that they have here, which are also significant. But they have a goal. They want to be able to buy sustainable energy. And so this is going to help them with that. It is increased tax revenue for the county, although although I would although I would note that we do not I mean, right now the tax laws in the tax laws that are currently a little bit in flux. We used to have an exemption on property taxes for solar equipment. We had that tossed out by the state Supreme Court in 2022. Right now, it is up to the individual assessors of each county to assess what they think the value of solar is. What a lot of developers do, including the utilities, is work out deals with the counties to do what's called a payment in lieu of taxes, or pilot. That would be the acronym we use for that. And so you see a lot of developers do that as far as like helping with revenue, putting that into the coffers of the county. It also provides benefit to human and environmental health. And I believe Susan Armstrong here has a question about the quality of land after solar panel decommission. That's interesting. I know that there are individual deals and leases with these customers um, that talks about how they are going to mitigate any kind of issue. I mean, look, you are talking about you're putting solar panels up on fertile farmland, farmland that has been used for crops or is being used for crops, and what impact that's going to have. Now, I am not a scientist. I am not someone who knows a whole lot about how soil works or how groundwater works. But I can tell you, I have talked to a number of farmers who are engaging in these leases, and they are engaging with not only utility companies, but they're also engaging with independent contractors for this. They will tell you, in addition to the income they're receiving, that there are provisions in those leases that they feel is adequate, that if something happens to these solar arrays in 30 or 40 years and they go away, that that land is still going to be quality land there, um, and um, oh, and that they're going to be able to start using it for farming if they choose to do so after that lease is over. I don't know if we have enough examples of that because I mean, right now, large scale solar is still so new. I mean, so I don't know if you can say that after 30 years, we know for sure what that land is going to look like. But I certainly know that most of these leases include provisions in there to help minimize any kind of impact there. So I hope that helps. Next slide, please. Okay. Um, One of the things that is challenging with these projects when the utility brings them to the Public Service Commission is you do see opposition from the Public Service Commission staff, and sometimes you see opposition from the Office of Public Counsel. Office of Public Counsel, my old job. I used to oppose things like this, but of course that was like 9 years ago, and so the technology, the law, the way that we do these things have kind of evolved a lot since then. Certainly the law was certainly not as well defined as it is now, and the law has basically said that the Public Service Commission can approve these sorts of projects. But what Public Service Commission staff, which is separate and segregated from the commission itself. I mean, they're kind of, doing, overview and regulatory oversight of these utilities. And so they are a separate party that appears in front of the Public Service Commission. They're arguing that the testimony wasn't adequate, that the evidence that that Ameren had put forward was not adequate. These projects are not economically feasible. That 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 the economics were not as significant as the need. I think basically their main objection was the fact that this is not something that was going to benefit the public. This is going to be something that was only benefiting a handful of corporate customers, which, I mean, let's face it, is true. But we argued that the commission had approved solar CCNs in the past without requiring what the staff was requesting here. Not to mention the fact that I believe, oh, and thanks, Nicole. Nicole Murs, our general counsel at Renew Missouri. She's been here since May of 2024. She has a good explanation for that in the comments if you're looking at it. Morris Woodruff is raising his hand. Can you write your question down in the chat? I'll get to it. Or we can save it to the end, whatever you want to do. I'll keep in mind. I'll ask you a question when we get towards the end. I'll ask your question. So don't forget. I'll try not to forget you. But basically, in the end, what ended up happening was, staff basically got some provisions in there that say that these were not going to get approved unless demand was met, unless they were fully subscribed. I think that was approved in May of 2024, but by June of 2024, the Ameren was able to come back to the commission and say, we've got everybody signed up for this. So it's full now. And so it was, oh, okay, it was an accidental hand raise. Well, okay, very good. If you do have a question, let me know. But that was approved on a condition, but then that condition was satisfied. So we feel pretty good about that. I would also note, just recently, Evergy filed with the Public Service Commission their request for 165 megawatts of power as well as a a corporate corporate subscription program. That's been filed. We are currently looking through their testimony. That is very early in that process. In fact, the deadline to intervene in that case isn't even until this upcoming Wednesday. Renew Missouri's already intervened in that case. We look forward to digging into it and seeing, if is there anything Evergy can improve? Can they make it better? What deficiencies might be there that the PSC staff and the Office of Public Counsel might have concerns with, and trying to address those in advance. So it is relevant to what we're doing now, and so it would be important to note that Evergy's got a somewhat similar, if not scaled back version of this that they've also filed. Next slide, please. Okay, yeah, and this was the decision. Again, I noted that some of this project was deferred, subject to the satisfaction of condition precedent. But again, they've already reached that and they've already got that, so that's good. Next slide. Okay, so here's kind of an interesting little legal quandary that we found ourselves in. Evergy's had a couple of rate cases before the Public Service Commission recently. I might have mentioned earlier that we just settled an Evergy case. That was Evergy West. That was for some of the rural areas outside of metropolitan Kansas City that Evergy serves. But before that, there was a case where we were talking about time of use rates, and we were talking about the solar subscription program. Now, this is a little bit of background. Evergy has a solar subscription program, just like Ameren does, just like Boone Electric does, just like Platte Clay does. And that's where, even if you don't have solar on your roof, or you don't have it mounted in the ground near your house, you are able to subscribe to solar at a premium cost, and you're able to enjoy that. Now, in addition to that program, we've had all this controversy involving time of use rates, and a lot of that controversy has been on the Evergy side because of decisions made by the Public Service Commission on how those time of use rates would be deployed. But one of the things that Renew Missouri was wanting to do was trying to get anyone who is using the solar subscription program to use time of use rates. Same way that we have also been working on allowing people with net metering on their roof or ground mounted to be able to use time of use rates as well. Utilities argued that the law does not allow for solar customers or those engaged in the solar subscription program to take advantage of time of use rates. We disagreed, but let's keep going on those slides and we'll talk about what happened here.
Just so you know, James,
Yeah.
it's 12:41 and there are 6 more information slides after this one.
Oh my gosh, what have I done? I warned Abby before we started this that I spent a lot of time talking about the first couple of slides, and then I just kind of rushed through all these other ones. But essentially, we were arguing that if you are subscribing to the solar program of Evergy, you should be able to take advantage of the time of use schedules. We basically argued the same thing that we argued under the Net Metering and Easy Connection Act, that solar customers, net meter customers, cannot be treated differently under the law than any other customers. And that's in 386-890 of the revised Missouri statutes. They should not be limited because they chose to support renewable development. Next slide, please. So essentially, what the commission ended up saying was that the time of use rates, this was such a small group of customers that it would not be cost effective. But they did say that they believe that they did not believe that there should be an option just for solar subscription customers. We're arguing there should have been an option for them. They said that was not cost effective. But they did believe, and they did agree with us the commission did, that Evergy and Ameren and Liberty Utility and Liberty Empire, once they do time of use rates, should be available to all customers in general rate cases. And that any costs or delays involving complex billing should, that's not reasonable. Um, and so that's one of the things that we've been working on with the Evergy West case is trying to give distributive generation customers the option of being able to take advantage of time of use rates. And that is part of the stipulation and agreement we reached with the company as well as the other parties, which we're still waiting on approval from the Public Service Commission as we speak. And we're also involved with that at the with Ameren in their rate case, which is also ongoing with the Public Service Commission as well. Next slide, please. Okay, so the ultimate decision, no change to solar block cost pricing at this time, but we are expanding time of use rates. Yeah, so I think we are going to see some progress on that. And I'm not necessarily saying, Renew Missouri is not necessarily saying that solar customers or net meter customers are going to see advantages to using time of use rates and coupling that with their solar consumption. However, they should have that option. They should have that opportunity. They should be able to look at that. So that's what we're ultimately arguing for. All right, next slide, please. Okay, let's just keep going. Let's just keep going from this. I know that the time of use rates is very controversial. If I start talking about the time of use controversy, I will never get done. So let's just skip over this real quick. Yep. Keep going. Keep going. I'm just going to skip this. Yeah. Okay. Well, we'll get to this. Okay. So, I mean, generally speaking, the time of use rates issue is not something that Renew Missouri had a lot of a position on. We have not taken a very defined position of time of use rates. We see advantages and disadvantages to them. The Public Service Commission had put forward mandatory time of use rates for all Evergy customers in their rate case, and that was involving a pretty high differential. But then Evergy basically came back and wanted to undo that. There had been some controversy that a state senator in a pretty high position was pretty upset about it. So we were basically arguing that the Public Service Commission shouldn't buckle to public pressure. Is basically what all that came down to. But anyway, so that's what that means. So when you go back and look at those slides, because we're going to provide those slides to you if you've signed up. So anyway, okay, so I'm looking at bills. I'm a Kansas Energy and I would give it a shot and see if they'll let you sign up. I mean, that's Kansas. I will tell you, I do not know how this has evolved over in Kansas. I don't know what arguments they've made, but I mean, I know that probably if you're getting solicitations from Evergy about time of use rates, that's probably because they're sending that to every customer. They go and you go talk to them and they say something about how like, oh, you're a solar customer, we can't do that. Bill, I'd be very curious to see what their response is that if you reached out to them, if you feel inclined to do so. Okay. Rush Island securitization. As a lot of you know, Rush Island's a very controversial coal plant that is operated by Ameren. It just recently shut down in October of 2024. But Ameren wanted to use the concept of securitization to shut that down, which just to give you all a primer on that, securitization is the concept where you can take stranded assets, you can take stranded debts, and if you're trying to shut down plant and you do not want those costs to be passed on to customers as a whole, you would take those stranded assets, you take those stranded debts, and you turn them into securities that could be sold on the market. I mean, basically talking about turning those into bonds. They would be backed up by ratepayers. They would be guaranteed by ratepayers. But it is a way that would help make it easier for utility companies to, among other things, shut down or retire their coal plants earlier. The commission had issued a financing order authorizing Ameren to use utility tariff bonds for energy transition costs and other costs associated with retiring the Rush Island Energy Center. I mean, and I should note, I mean, one of the big things that's controversial about this is this was a very poorly run coal plant. It was subject of numerous litigation at the federal level and the state level. Our friends at the Sierra Club had been pushing a lot of that litigation, and so there was a belief by a number of other interveners in this case, Public Service Commission staff, Office of Public Counsel, Consumer Council of Missouri, that essentially rewarding them by letting them use securitization to that would help encourage future mismanagement. Ultimately, next slide, please. Oh wait, go back. I thought there was another slide. Never mind. I mean, ultimately, our argument was, look, it's a lousy coal plant. It was causing damage to the environment. It was causing damage to water quality and air quality around it. It needs to be shut down. The whole reason we have securitization, which was passed by the Missouri legislature in 2021 and signed by Governor Parson after it was passed by them, was to let them use this process to help hasten and make it easier for them to shut down coal plants that were bad. I mean, that's the whole point. Like, the whole point is Renew Missouri does not think coal plants are the most effective, efficient way to generate power in the state. So we should be, trying to encourage it, especially when it's been poorly managed and poorly ran, like Rush Island was. A caveat to this, actually from this week, is it appears, I think, that Ameren and the Sierra Club and a number of other parties have reached an agreement where Ameren is going to pay around $61 million in fees and fines for how they handled Rush Island. I have not dug into that judgment. It's pretty lengthy. I don't know if ratepayers are going to be on the hook for any of that or not. I would suspect that probably the judgment is pretty clear that ratepayers are not going to be, but I don't know. It's hard for me. It's hard to say without knowing for sure. So that was a case that was tried earlier this year. It was decided in the summer. I know there has been some efforts to potentially appeal this decision. I think the Office of Public Counsel was in the process of looking at appealing that. I don't know what they ended up doing. Maybe Nicole knows, maybe someone on here knows whether a notice of appeal was filed on that or not. As a lot of you also know, the appellate process is very slow. And even if a notice of appeal was put forward, it's going to take a very long time before that gets its way through the Western District Court of Appeals. So there's that. And now with the last couple of minutes we've got 2 more minutes. Does anybody have any questions? Ugh. But look at that. That's a good looking beef cow there. Look at that. Mm. Oh, Voltus. Yeah, thanks, Bill. Okay. So I mean, I'm gonna have to do this a little bit off memory because this was about a year ago that the Public Service Commission made a ruling that basically said that third-party aggregators could come in and work on demand response. Basically saying that they could offer aggregation services for that purpose. I know the utility companies were opposed to that. I know that utilities did not, they kind of see that as kind of encroaching upon their turf. But ultimately, the Scott Roop Public Service Commission said that for the purpose of demand response services, aggregators could come in and do that. Voltus is one of them. I know Voltus has had some other legal problems and challenges. I know there's been some complaints filed against them about how they've done their bookkeeping. So I'm not sure where we are with that, but I do know that they were one of the big proponents of the PSC making that decision. They did make that decision. That was that was about a year ago. So yes, there was a docket on that. There was a docket involving third-party aggregators being involved with this, and it is only for commercial customers. I think when you look at FERC Order 2222, if that is continuing to be allowed to be implemented, I think you're going to see more and more aggregators being involved with residential demand. Um, oh my gosh. And Robin Rotman just asked me this question with 1 minute left. What kind of impact? Well, we might actually do some sort of programming on this. Um, but what's the impact? I mean, it's hard to say. I mean, like right now, so much of what we're talking about here is impacted by the Public Service Commission, which is all state level. But as an example, with gas plants, Evergy, Ameren, they have been talking a lot about how they want to build out their gas plant generation. One of our arguments that Renew Missouri has made against this is that federal regulations are only going to get tighter. They're only going to get stricter when it comes to air quality as well as the operation of gas plants. Do I believe that is going to be one of our arguments now? No. I think any kind of rules involving any restrictions on gas plants are probably going to eventually get unwound. And I mean, I think there was some belief the courts might have done that anyway. But certainly, I think the EPA coming in is not going to do much to enforce or restrict that. Um, but ultimately, I think at the state level, let me just say this at the state level, I do believe that Governor-elect Kehoe is going to be a lot more hands-on of a governor than I think, Governor Parson was pretty laissez-faire. I think Governor Kehoe is going to he's going to have a much tighter view of how utility regulation works. I'm not saying that's good or bad. I'm just saying I think that the second floor of the Capitol building is going to be a lot more engaged, and I think you're going to see the Public Service Commission reflect that. And as far as what we're doing at the federal level, I'm just really hopeful. Yes, absolutely, Cheryl Markham. We are going to continue doing that. Don't worry. There's a lot of arguments against gas generation that we have put forward out there. So I don't think that's going to be a concern that that's the only argument we've had. But it is certainly one less argument we're gonna be able to take advantage of. I've kept you over 2 minutes. I would love to continue this conversation more. We're gonna save. I'm gonna mentally remember some of these questions, and we might try to incorporate that into a later conversation. If you want more information, this is where you can find us. Thanks again. I hope you have a good Friday, and I hope you have a good weekend. Talk to you soon. Bye.